legal age to drink. So I bought beer for my whole class the second semester. I don't even remember my second semester. Back then you could actually drive and drink a 3-2 beer. It was legal. And then somebody fucked it all up. So
Democrats.
what,
I can edit the audio, so go ahead. Feel free.
My peanut gallery.
what is your definition of clean?
Not dirty.
Removing dirt at
I
the
gotta write
molecular
that one
level.
down. Not dirty.
How about that, Ron?
Remove contamination.
At the molecular level.
Yeah.
You studied for this.
He did. He
Dude, I've been
did.
studying chemistry.
So
My brain works different.
Ron gave you the answer. Just
No, he
it's
did.
Okay.
atoms make up molecules, and molecules make up matter. So a methane molecule is carbon, and hydrogen. Hydrocarbon is nothing more than carbon atoms and hydrogen atoms. So this right here is a methane molecule. It's made up of 5 atoms. That's the lightest gas. So crude oil makes up molecules of lots of different types of hydrocarbon. As we get in butane, so this is in chemistry, is CH4. 1 carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms. Butane, what is butane? Butane is C4H10. So it's 4 carbon atoms with 10 hydrogen atoms. Then as we get in to heavier hydrocarbon, those molecules get larger, and they're made up of more carbon and more hydrogen. You get into asphalt and bitumen, I think they call it bitumen because it's a bitch. Molecules for asphalt and bitumen are like a honeycomb. They're like a honeycomb. And they can be bonded, they can be double bonded and triple bonded. So the hydrogen can be, it's tighter. And that asphalt gets the molecules get real long and large and hard to break up. We can't, this process diffuses molecules. It'll separate molecules. So you dilute them and you make it easier to handle. It's like you can put the chemistry in asphalt and it'll make it more like runny like water. So it diffuses the molecules, separates the molecules. It doesn't change the molecule, it just separates them. Because a bitumen and asphalt could cover this whole board in a honeycomb. And there'll be, the asphalt and bitumen has metals in it, all kinds of metals. It'll contain nitrogen, sulfur, oxygen, nickel, vanadium, rhodium, all those metals that come from deep in the earth. So that all bonds it together, bonds those molecules tightly together, and they're hard to separate, to dilute, so we can easily clean stuff and handle it. So that's as far as I'm gonna go on the chemistry, because you understand that now, that molecules of the hydrocarbons are bonded together tightly, and this process separates them to where we can handle them and get rid of them. Then
While you're drawing that, Ron, so what you're saying is the chemistry that you're injecting into that steam touches these chemicals and pulls them apart into little pieces that then can flow out through, they just kind of melt away like.
yeah, it's like things that are glued together, and you heat them up,
Mm-hmm.
and you can easily peel it apart from the glue.
You had a comment. I could see it coming out of you.
Can I borrow a drop of water?
Yes.
But the first thing the chemistry will have to do, see that drop? That's called surface friction. So the chemistry goes in there and it elongates the water molecules. So after it does that, when this water hits the tank, there's no more surface friction, so this water will just keep spreading until there's nothing left. And that's how it bonds with all these molecules, because the minerals and the metal in it are negative charged. The chemistry that he's pumping in is positive charge. Well, when it comes to atoms, negative and positives draw into each other. So these negative dirty ones attach to these positive ones. And because we elongated the water molecule, now it can wash across the top of the surface of it.
Excellent.
In a refinery, they separate this in a crude unit, in a fractionator. That's an atmospheric tower, 120 foot tall, 20 foot diameter. And fractionator will run at 30 pounds of pressure. And the crude oil comes in to the fractionator. It's what's called the flash zone. And that's just a vapor space. There's no liquid level there. It's just an empty space at 720 degrees. Crude oil at 720 degrees enters that tower. That's heat and pressure. That's the key. Heat and pressure. And it doesn't matter how much heat and pressure you have. Pressure creates heat. You can hydraulic line.
Yep.
You can be pumping a hydraulic line and have the valve closed on the end, and that starts getting hot. Put your hand on it, it starts getting hot. Pressure is building. Pressure creates heat. So in this fractionator, out the bottom of the fractionator is what's called reduced crude. It's reduced crude because the light molecules, when they hit the flash zone, the light molecules rise in that tower. And at different levels in that tower, you can pull off diesel molecules,
jet fuel,
and
kerosene, gas.
You're coming overhead is the gasolines. And the gasoline can be broke down into other products like stabilizer and rerun, but it's gasoline. So the gasoline molecules go out the top. The way you get these off of the fractionator in liquid form, there's trays in that tower.
Seen one of these at Bismarck State College during their oil and gas, and they have it's a big glass tower.
They're bubble trays.
Yeah, and it's got separate little.
So there's a liquid level on those trays, and the gas molecules condense, turn to liquid, and you're pulling liquid off of those trays.
Each little tray. Yeah.
Lighter gases rise to the fractionator tower. We have to maintain 30 pounds of pressure on there to keep the heavy molecules dropping to the bottom.
Which I always thought was weird, because if it's easier to in this aspect or in this process to be able to distill this crude down to say diesel, but yet diesel's way more expensive than gasoline, but yet it's more cost efficient and effective to be able to make diesel than gas.
But it's used commercially, so there's a markup. Anything that makes money costs more money.
Yeah.
So, and the reduced crude can be broken down. Those molecules can be diffused more. The reduced crude is fed to a vacuum tower. It's under vacuum. And the same process takes place in the vacuum tower. You just get lighter molecules out the top. So, this fractionation is actually what takes place in things like the heater treater, which we'll get to shortly. Now the process that we do we've got steam. Our steam at about 13 pounds pressure. The chemistry goes through a check valve. And the purpose of that check valve, because the pump that we're injecting the chemistry just pumps about we stroke it about every 4 or 5 seconds. So you need this check valve in there, because if you didn't have the check valve in here, the 13 pounds of steam pressure is going to come back to your chemical pump. So we have a check valve in there to prevent that. The check valve also acts as an atomizer. So when the diaphragm pump strokes, it misses the chemistry into smaller droplets. The smaller droplets, when it hits the steam, atomizes quicker and more efficiently.
By atomize, you mean you breaks it up into atom-sized components. Okay.
If we didn't have the check valve in there, you just have a slug of chemistry hit that steam, and it's not all going to vaporize.
You'd have to use a screen.
Some of it will, when it hits the vessel, the chemistry, if it's slugged in there, half the chemistry is just going to drop straight to the bottom. So that check valve helps atomize it into smaller droplets, so it's pretty much all 100% vaporized. The steam is only used to heat and to carry the chemistry. That's its only purpose. It creates a little pressure, and it heats what you're going to clean, and it carries the chemistry every place.
Delivery agent.
Yep. So this cleaning process, there's nothing else that can clean this clean in this industry, because we have to heat. Most of this equipment is made of carbon steel. Carbon steel is the most porous, and when it's cold, those pores are closed up, and those pores actually are filled with hydrocarbon molecules. So when we heat it up, you get it to 185 degrees, those pores open, and when you inject the chemistry cleans them pores out of the hydrocarbon. Then when the vessel cools back down, those pores close up, but they're clean. There's nothing in there. I've seen rail cars that they'll just do a diesel wash, cold washing. Those pores never open. And then the car will pass inspection, it looks clean, and it'll set out in a storage yard, and in the summer heat, the inside of that car will heat up, and those pores will start to open and bleed that hydrocarbon,
Sweat.
and the car's dirty again.
Hmm.
So this process cleans them pores out.
Which is why it works so great on scrapping out metal.
Mm.
Yep.
Because they won't take oil field scrap up here. But if you do this, it takes the hard hydrocarbons out, and that's what they measure for.
There's
in
an
the scrapyard.
entire new opportunity for sales, hemp.
Anything that gets scrapped has to have the hydrocarbons out of it. It's so bad that Rain for Rent sells their frac tanks for $500 and they'll deliver them to farmers.
Mhm.
They turn them into water tanks and the cows are eating out of those without being cleaned.
Wow.
Beef.
That's
But
kind
that's how
of
desperate they are. to
kind
get
of
rid
beef
them.
I want.
$500 and we'll deliver anywhere in the state.
Wow.
Because that's how hard it is to get rid of the shit.
Heater treaters. Heater treaters got a fire tube that heats the oil, the emulsion. The crude oil comes into the heater treater up towards the top, spills out onto a flash pan, tray of some sort. The heater treater, they'll run it 150 degrees to 230 degree temperature. So, you gotta go to the bathroom? Okay. So, the oil comes into the top, and that temperature, there's pressure on the heater treater. Probably runs 15 or 20 pounds.
Right.
So that's your pressure, and this is your heat. So the oil comes in, it's called an emulsion because it's the water, solids, and everything's in it. Comes into the top, and that little 20 pounds of pressure in this 150 to 230 degrees lets the gas out through that. It's like a Brillo pad up there. And that gas actually fires the burner. They use that gas, or it'll be flared if there's too much, but it fires the burner. And then your solids, like the sand drops all the way to the bottom. And then you got water. And up here, the gas goes out the top. You got the good sellable oil that pulls off the tower. So it's all about heat and pressure. Our process is the same way. Heat and pressure.
Goes from the wellhead straight to the treater.
Mm-hmm.
Off the flow line.
So what we do when we go in to clean those and it's full of sand, it's not going to function well because it's
It's not heating properly.
not heating properly. Okay.
And you're not getting a proper separation. And actually that screen that he has diagrammed up at the top, it works like that check valve he was talking about. When those molecules hit it, it disperses.
Yeah, that's
So it's basically their check valve. We can get rid of our check.
demister.
Yeah.
Demister. It's a demister.
Gotcha.
And if we didn't have the check valve, we could put screens in our line and accomplish the same thing. They learned that in drag racing probably
Okay.
30 years ago.
Excellent.
So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. Heat and pressure. defuse the molecules, we can get rid of them. That is it. Simple. So it doesn't matter what you got, like the frac tanks. It doesn't matter what you got. You have to build that pressure. Yesterday, 507 miles.
Yeah, that was a haul.
We done two jobs. We went out to a well. They needed 2 oily frac tanks cleaned so they could put fresh water in them used for mixing concrete.
You can't have no contaminants on concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Because that holds all your pressure on that wellhead. So they're pretty anal about that.
We went out there an hour and a half. So if you got we did it both at the same time, basically.
2 500-barrel frac tanks at once.
And they look beautiful when you're done.
We started steam to the first one, and
How do you close the frac tank in so that you can build pressure in it? Do you crank down the?
closed it up.
Okay.
Just close it up. Every
Close the
open.
lids on the top, and they're not sealed tight.
I was gonna say they're.
So you don't have to vent then either, because you can just vent around the lids.
Right.
Gotcha.
Just let them. You have to. We started steaming in about 20 minutes. We had good steam out the vents on the first one, and so we know we had the pressure. The pressure, us cleaning in this process, you might get 3 to 5 pounds of pressure. That's pressure. So any solids on the wall are gonna fall to the bottom. And the oil.
So I mean, as long as there's pressure, then it's okay. I know on shooters you said we're running around 13 pounds. Does that affect at all the time or the amount of time that we're supposed to steam that vessel for?
No. How dirty the vessel is, that determines how much time it's gonna take.
And
And
then,
you can't always, there's carbon stains. I mean, this stuff out here has never been cleaned this way before. But we get it beyond oil field cleaning. Their cleaning standards are totally different.
they're really low up here.
Yeah, so, once we started just about the time we started chemical to the first one, we had the steam valve is open 40%.
Ron, how do you know when to start the chemical?
When you've got the temperature,
The temperature,
I've got
because
my
the temperature,
going
And it has to be.
above 180.
that's
Okay.
when the pores open on the steel.
I've cleaned rail cars in the wintertime that I'm only showing 160 degrees. But if you got steam rolling out the top, the inside of that vessel is at that temperature. There's an equilibrium in tanks and rail cars and frac tanks. There's an equilibrium inside that vapor space. It's 170 degrees. Now what that means, when you reach that 170 degrees inside what you're cleaning, the steam stops condensing. You're making water inside that until you hit that 170 degrees. When you hit that 170 degrees, the steam stops condensing and your temperature comes right on up real quick. So it's the amount of time it takes to get to that 170. And if you're showing 170 degrees on the outside of a frac tank or a vessel, and you got steam coming out the top, you know damn well it's hotter than that inside. But when the inside reaches that 170 degrees, the steam stops condensing. And then you're ready for chemistry.
Okay.
So if you're out here in the wintertime cleaning one of these, and you can't get above 170 degrees on the outside, but you got steam coming out the top, you're good to go.
Okay.
So before we put the chemistry in that first frac tank yesterday, then we cracked the steam valve to the second one open 2 rounds to start heating this up. We injected the chemistry, and our temperature came up to the 170 degrees on the second one, while this one was about done with the steam dwell. And then I looked at my notes. We started the chemistry on this one when we shut that steam off. It was ready to go.
And like on a 500 barrel tank, do we inject still 20 gallons of chemistry, or do we?
We put about 15.
15 gallons.
We're more than likely we're using twice as much chemical as necessary. But we know on these heater treaters that 20 gallons does everything we need.
Okay.
So.
And for the cost differential of a few extra gallons of material, it's worth.
Not having to re-steam.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
A few extra gallons of chemistry.
So even on a 500 barrel, because it's bigger than a heater treater, right? Would you, 20 gallons is still going to be sufficient?
Yeah.
Okay.
The chemistry, 20 years ago, they used to say that the chemistry encapsulates the H2S, and it really doesn't encapsulate those molecules. It surrounds them with the chemistry molecules. This chemistry is the only chemistry any chemical company sells for cleaning purposes. This is the only chemistry that's totally concentrated, has absolutely no water in it at all. There's other chemistries out there that they sell for this process. Zyme-Flow, FQE's got a degreaser they sell, but if you look on the SDS, it's 70% water.
So this is the concentrated
This
stuff.
is the only
Good to go.
chemistry in the industry that's concentrated.
Okay.
So it might cost $18 a gallon, but the other chemistries sell between $10 and $12 a gallon, but it's 3/4 water. And there's people, there's clients that will buy the other chemistries and it takes, I've used the other chemistries. So there's a high concentrations of H2S can leave pyrophorics in any vessel, and that's sulfur compounds. And the pyrophorics, after you clean a vessel, it's unlikely we'll run into it out here, those high levels of H2S, but that sulfur is pyrophoric. The old matches used to be sulfur, stick matches. So we cleaned a tank one time, and the roof rafters, the steel plates for the roof of the tank lay on top of the rafters. On top of those rafters collected these pyrophorics. We cleaned that tank and started doing maintenance on it because it's gas tested free. It was about day 27, we started removing the old roof plates, put new roof plates on that tank, and it started smoldering. They got just enough oxygen to them, it auto ignited.
Mm.
So pyrophorics, there's chemistry that you can vapor phase to neutralize those pyrophorics.
Is that something we need to be concerned about with what we're doing?
No, because I haven't run into anybody out in these oil fields that even knows what pyrophoric is. So I doubt that we'd run into it. But it's something to look at over time on some of these tanks out here. We'll just have to keep an eye on it.
Just to reiterate something that you had said, actually, the Bakken has the highest H2S wells in the country. That's why we have one basin out here and nobody else does. It's because of how high our H2S is.
So there's probably, I mean, I would think, because in the refinery, the pyrophorics come from the crude oil over time.
Right.
They build up in tops of equipment, even in fractionator towers. We have to neutralize them before we can open them because of pyrophorics.
Just to go back to that too, when I first moved up here, you could light your water faucet on fire.
Mm-hmm.
The water would burn, coming right out of your faucet.
So it over time it's a buildup of sulfur, H2S, as it dries, it leaves a dry material, yellowy, and it will self-ignite. It has an auto ignition. If you know to have a fire, you've got to have your an ignition source, heat, and fuel, and oxygen. So if everything is just perfect, you can have a fire.
But is that a concern for us in what we're doing?
I think we need to probably be asking some of these engineers, like in a gas plant, you're gonna find it in a gas plant, no doubt about it.
But for what we're doing with the vapor phase, with tanks like frac tanks and
I would think in some of those demisters at the top of the heater treaters could build up pyrophorics.
Okay.
We're probably cleaning that out and driving the light contaminants out. So, because this chemistry, it only affects the organics molecules of hydrocarbon. Solid sand, it'll break up you're gonna get sand on the walls. Some are on the burner tube, built up metals and stuff. Well, this chemistry dilutes those molecules where they'll fall, but it doesn't, it won't diffuse solids, inorganics. But if those inorganics molecules are being held together by hydrocarbon molecules, it'll dilute the hydrocarbon molecules and let the inorganics drop to the bottom.
so the bottom line is when we get done injecting the chemistry and then we steam dwell it for another period of time, anything that's left in the tank is your inorganics, your sands and your sulfurs and your metals and those kind of things. And there's no oil mixed in with it, is the key. Okay.
So you just want to remember on what everything that we clean, you have to. We're probably going to run into things out here that, well, we had a couple of treaters last week. We were actually steaming through the oil.
Yep.
The manway cover, we were steaming into that manway cover, and as we started heating up, they couldn't open a vent on top. We had to open some sample tap vents on the side, and as we got up above 150 degrees temperature, that steam turned blue. And
Like an old Ford burning oil.
yeah, yeah. And after we injected the chemistry, started the steam well, it turned blue again. Huh. They had
A 90.
inside that manway cover, they had a pipe that went down to the bottom. We were actually picking up oil the whole time. But I mean, it turned out all right.
Yeah.
But you wanna be sure that your steam, whatever you're steaming, is in a vapor space, out of the liquid.
So if it's not like that, then what you do then?
You
Well,
suck it out. We've done that too.
Yeah.
If they're really dirty, after the first steam, we'll suck
Good
them
question.
out, and then we'll.
So if you start seeing that blue smoke coming out, you know you've got
Yeah.
stuff you got to pull out of the
Yeah,
bottom
we
of it.
Pull it out. Or if they're really dirty, we pull it out too, because the steam will still roll across the top and carry it out.
Gotcha. Okay.
You watch that steam vapor will tell you what's going on inside.
Mm-hmm.
And even the steam vapor, when you start injecting the chemistry, you'll have that steam cloud will reduce a little bit. And that's because of the chemistry going in there. You're wetting it up a little bit, and it's cleaning. And then when you shut the chemistry off and watch that steam cloud, and then it'll lighten up. The chemistry makes it a little more white. When you shut the chemistry off, that chemistry, the steam dwell, the purpose of steam dwell is you use up the chemistry that's inside, burn it out. And it actually carries the lighter contaminants out with it.
But that's not something that we need to be concerned with. That's not something that we need to be concerned with. Like health wise, if there's the lighter contaminants in this VPRX, it's not bad for our respiratory system, anything like that.
It's the safest chemistry out there, but I mean, it'll take your breath away.
Yeah.
It will take your breath away. You want, just like anything else, you want to stay out of the steam cloud.
So
Sometimes I'll test it with my glove and in the steam that's venting and smell it. I can tell the concentration of it, but we found out in these heater treaters, 30-minute heat up, pump the chemistry, gallon and a half a minute, and a 30-minute steam dwell, we're good. And I don't see anything. We did horizontal yesterday. The horizontals are gonna be, they can be an issue, but Mike wanted us to rumble that sand with steam. Well, to be able to rumble something to get the solids out while you're steaming, you have to be able to pull that out, because rumbling, so you got sand in the bottom, and you steam in to suspend it in the water. We had to put 10 barrels of water in.
I'm so sorry. Can I go?
So to rumble something, you've got to have water in there and suspend those solids, but you have to be able to pull them out while you're rumbling it with steam. And these horizontal treaters don't have that capability.
there's
So-
no way to put the steam in at the bottom, or what's the?
There's no way to put steam in and pull the liquid out at the same time.
Gotcha.
So what we did, they had the 10 barrels of water in there. We started heating it up, had it up 200 degrees real quick. And then there was a outlet at each end, and we opened both valves, and he pulled it out, and got sand with the liquid. So, because in the horizontal treaters, there's a weir about halfway back that lets the oil skim off to this side. So we just heated up 200 degrees, opened both drain valves, and he pulled it out. And then when we got done, we opened the manway on the side, just like we do on the verticals, and just sucked it out with the hydrovac.
The next time we do a newer horizontal treater, there are valves in the middle where we can try to rumble it.
I've seen.
They normally got like 3 right up in the center.
But
But it has to be a real new one for that.
and I don't know, that one may not have had a lot of sand in it to begin with.
Right.
So some of the horizontals could be a challenge if they've got a lot of sand in them. But at this point, we're just going to do the horizontals the same as the uprights, and even the uprights we started pulling them out before we inject chemistry. He'll pull liquid out before we inject the chemistry, and they're turning out real good. So
Excellent.